Unfortunately, people want mega churches
And say they're successful.
and say they're successful, but you have mega churches where people don't like each other.
And their faith is not strong in the Lord.
Yep. And you have baby Christians,
Yeah.
unfortunately. And I'll probably get some strife for this or whatever we're going to say right now, but
Hey, we speak the truth here at Elohim Podcast.
Unfortunately, we have to speak it because that's the only way we can create change.
Yes.
That's the only way we can get the numbers to start going back into the church.
Thank you for listening to Elohim Podcast, a podcast about real life issues from a biblical perspective. Today we have Jonathan Garcia, a youth pastor at Phoenix Faith Center. How's it going, man? How are you doing?
No, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on, Ezekiel. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for allowing me to be here and just hang out with you.
Of course, man. Today I want to talk about the great church fallout generation. We're living some times where, we're looking at our churches, the attendance is going down. We're looking at these youth groups and they're looking a little, skimpy. But before we get into that, you were telling me, and I was congratulating you on your house. You've recently bought a house, and you were just telling me how grateful and how much of a burden has come off of you. But can you tell me a little bit what has happened?
No. So first of all, just give God all the honor and glory. On Tuesday, we were able to close on our house.
Awesome.
Something of a process that we've started probably about 3-4 months ago. Not gonna lie, with this market the way it is, it was a little discouraging. Yeah, right now it was just crazy because people are getting outbid with cash offers. People are outbidding higher than normal. But we just put it all in God's hands, and God provided the perfect house that we needed as a family.
That you needed as a family. Yeah, and you're also you recently adopted somebody.
Yeah, so me and my wife, we're in the process of right now adopting a 12-year-old. And so he's been with us officially for a full year.
Yeah.
And so we're still in the final processing of adoption. So right now we're just fostering to adopt.
Wow. You guys have such a big heart, man. You guys working with youth, making a great impact. People don't understand that kids in general, even the kids ministry, you're preparing the next preacher, the next pastor. But when you're working with youth, they're not just the future, they're also the present. They have so many capabilities. They're so innovative with music, with just, how online services are going on right now. But you were telling me that, you're so happy now because you went through a hard process in your life where you had become homeless and all these other things. How was that like?
I get let go from my job.
Man, that's tough. Just like that?
Yeah, just like that. I got let go because of some processes. I won't go into detail, but so that was the first stone that hit the fan. And then after that, like I said, our church went through a split. We were living in a rehab home because my wife was the director. And
At a rehab home?
Yeah, so the church where we were involved in used to operate in rehab homes.
Yeah.
So my wife was actually the women's rehab home director.
Oh, okay.
And I was staying there as security. We were in a room on the other side of the house. And then we basically get kicked out of that too.
Man, that's tough right there.
And so for a moment, I could honestly say I was jobless, I was homeless, and I was churchless.
Man, when it rains, it pours, right?
One can become bitter because of this.
Because you've been in church your whole life, right? Your parents were pastors as well.
Yeah, so I'm a 4th-generation pastor.
Wow.
And
Fourth-generation pastor.
So being that I'm 4th generation, I come from a legacy. I come from generations of people that have given everything and have served God with everything. And so I began to really develop a bitterness, an anger, honestly, towards God.
Really?
And it's something that I have battled these past 2-3 years.
What are some of the emotions you felt towards God or the church?
Really of just like, I did everything the right way. I did everything I was asked to do. Why is this happening?
Why is this happening? That's a big one.
And I'm sure a lot of people run into that nowadays because they feel like they do everything right and nothing goes wrong. They do everything right and still everything goes wrong.
Yeah, I agree.
And I'm sure that a lot of that happens to ministers and pastors and musicians and everybody that's involved in church.
You're like, why God? Why am I homeless? Why did I lose my job? I've been faithful. I've given everything to ministry. I got married the right way. I've served you from my youth and all that stuff. Because I met you at youth events and stuff like that, and you're very active, and your wife as well. And one can ask, like, God, why don't you have my back? What's up? Sometimes we're preaching, we sing, but are we truly giving? Because the spirit is weary. Where is the spiritual feeding? Sometimes we're just reading the Bible because we know we have to preach. We are doing this or doing that, and we're emptying our cup, right? We're giving our cup, and we're not pouring into the cup. And I think a lot of pastors, not with malintention or anything, it just happens. It just happens. And I think that's a great strategy that works for you guys. You and your wife now, you guys were boyfriend and girlfriend at the time, but it's very important. Everybody wants something,
No, and it's just like what you said. Everybody wants something. Everybody wants, okay, what's the word that the pastor's giving?
Yeah.
Everybody wants prayer. Everybody wants a word. Give me a word.
Or they just want to vent.
Yeah, they just want to vent. They want to talk to somebody.
You know what's very frustrating when like you give so much advice and they still don't take it, and you just realize, oh, they just wanted to vent.
Yeah.
They didn't want advice. They just wanted to vent. They just wanted to let their emotions out. And it's draining though.
It is. And that's why, and even in this next season, I've learned to rest.
Rest in the Lord.
To rest.
How does that look? How do you rest?
For me, is getting away from everything.
Yeah.
I tell my wife all the time, I'm real big on 1 or 2 day trips.
Okay.
Where I say, hey, get your things, let's go.
Vámonos.
Pack a bag, let's go.
Fierro.
And so, and even getting to a point where it's okay to miss Sunday.
Because we grew up, if you don't take a vacation, you better take it on Monday. Because by Friday, you better be at church, or for sure by Sunday, right?
Yeah. And so, and I think that's where even like for me, I've learned to look at ministry in a different way. If we look at churches,
yeah,
we look at churchgoers, we look at a lot of things. Sadly, churches are declining.
Yep. The elephant in the room, right? Let's be straight up.
Yeah.
Churches are getting smaller in attendance and whatever you want to measure it by.
It could be in multiple or different ways. It could be because either churches are not becoming attractive. It could be that churches are becoming too traditional. It's a whole lot of different aspects. And something that I've personally learned, because one, I grew up in a Hispanic church.
Yes.
Hispanic hardcore old school church where it was puro corritos, alabaré, all that stuff. To being involved with more of the English church. So I learned 2 different cultures.
Yes.
And I've learned that if we can balance both cultures, that's where we can find success in ministry. And a lot of times, ministry, and even you had to have a, and this is something God had with me, just a change in perspective.
Change in perspective.
Because many times we want to measure success based off of numbers. Unfortunately, people want mega churches
and say they're successful.
But you have mega churches where people don't like each other.
And their faith is not strong in the Lord.
Yep. And you have baby Christians.
Yep.
Unfortunately. And I'll probably get some strife for this or whatever we're going to say right now, but...
Hey, we speak the truth here at Elohim Podcast.
Unfortunately, we have to speak it because that's the only way we can create change.
Yes.
That's the only way we can get the numbers to start going back into the church. And that's why I shared that post a few weeks ago.
Yeah, the post, I saw some people have different perspective, different ideas. The post that you put, it was about the four generation fade, right? About priority. Explain a little bit about
So
what that post was about.
so the reason why I posted that is, one, being a youth pastor, I see that. I see the importance parents give to church. I see the importance parents don't give to church. I see the importance youth give to church. And I
Yeah.
see the importance youth don't give to church.
And it greatly impacts.
And so, and I tell all my youth all the time, the seeds we sow now, we will harvest when we get older.
Mm.
So if you're not laying a strong biblical principle, biblical foundation now, you won't have it when you get older.
Yep.
And I tell them, you want Jesus the easy way,
Or
or you want Jesus the hard way,
the real way.
the real way. And unfortunately, you can do everything right and still get it the hard way, but it's okay because you have God with you.
Yes.
That was one of the big differences of why everything I went through and I still maintained, I still kept serving, I still kept preaching, I still kept saying God is faithful, God will do it, God can do anything, God will bless you, everything. I still kept preaching it because I still believed it even though it wasn't happening.
Yeah, because your faith wasn't measured based off your circumstance, right? Our worship shouldn't be based off our circumstance. In the good, in the bad, in the ugly, in the pretty, God is still God. God is still good. We might not understand it. We might not comprehend it. Like Job, he lost everything. He lost his kids. His own wife told him to curse God. He got sick, his properties, his riches, and he was out there with leprosy, with other lepers, and his friends were like, "What are you doing? What happened to you?" And getting criticized. And he still believed in God, still had faith in God. But when we leave that process, we come out of there stronger and with a different perspective. Sometimes God wants to work in our hearts and work in our minds, and the only way that He can is by bringing Jesus the hard way. Because when we're kids, right? I work in the mental health field. There's a saying that when you work with kids, the cement is still not dry. And you can still mold the kid a little bit, teach them some stuff. Yeah, there's trauma and everything, but you can love on them, care about them. Now, when they're adults, that cement has dried, and it's harder to make somebody change the way that they're thinking, their habits, their lifestyle, and that's where it like gets harder on them, you know. And I think God is the same. He's our Father, and we're His children. And sometimes He goes and pushes us through the fire so that He can mold us in what He wants us to become. Not what we are and not what we want to be, but what He has us to become. And, we can go on for hours about this because there's so many issues, there's so many details. But I think those are big, major ones that a lot of the church, and we can blame the members all we want, but it starts with leadership. It starts with the head of the pastor. It starts with the messages that we preach. If we're not teaching our members and the parents to make church a priority and to instill biblical principles in our children, then when they're older, it's not going to transpire to their kids. And also, like you said, leading by example. Leaders lead by example. And then the third one that I get from this is unity, right? That we need to create unity in the church. But Jonathan, any last words that you want to give on this podcast to that person that is listening?
The last words that I would give to anyone watching this, whether you're an adult, to a kid, to a teenager, is one, fall in love with God.
Fall in love with God.
You won't be in church if you're not in love with God.
That's true.
You won't serve the church if you're not in love with God.
Fall in love with God.
You won't live your best life unless you have fallen in love with God. Because the moment you fall in love with God, everything changes.
Your perspective changes.
Your perspective changes.
Your priorities change.
Your priorities, your way of thinking, your way of talking, your way of living.
Your habits, everything.
Everything changes because you have fallen in love with God. And what does that do? It gives it gives you purpose. It gives you desires. It gives you new dreams. It gives you new strength. Because why? Because it's that love. The love. That love pushes you. The love of God pushes you to talk to somebody. The love of God pushes you to serve in the church. The love that you have for God pushes you to be faithful to God in everything.
Amen. You're preaching right now, bro.
Yeah, and like I said, this is just something that I'm so passionate about.
Yeah.
It's just trying to encourage people to fall in love with God and have an encounter with Him, have an experience that will change your life. And that's what I tell a lot of the parents in our church. Just make sure your youth come on Friday night, because we have youth on Friday. Just get them there, whether they're angry, whatever.
Upset.
Just get them there and God will do the rest.
God will do the rest. I like that. God will do the rest.
Same thing with church. Just get to church and God will do the rest.
God will do the rest. No, man, I agree. I agree with especially the last part. Fall in love with God. Whatever we talked about, whatever point, now that it starts with falling in love with God. That's why we give our life to Christ. And we no longer live, but Christ lives in us. Thank you for coming to Elohim Podcast, a podcast about real life issues from a biblical perspective. I really appreciate you. Pastor Jonathan Garcia, you've been a blessing to this podcast. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me. Like you said, we could go on and on about this if we needed to, but maybe we'll save it for another one later.
For another podcast,
Yeah.
podcast part 2.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you for watching Elohim Podcast. For the full episode, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and many more. You can find the link in the description below.